Hello everyone and welcome to the second instalment of my Star Wars Versus series. Today I will be analysing Mace Windu versus Darth Zannah, weighing up their physical abilities, force abilities, fighting abilities, tactics/strategy and gear/weapons to determine who would most likely win a battle on neutral ground. Let me know in the comments if you think I have missed something or have any disagreements about whichever part of my analysis. And without further ado, we will start with the physical capabilities. Mace Windu was a human Corran male, descending from the planet Harun Kal, standing at 6'2" and weighing 84 kilograms. He was in excellent physical shape all around and had taken his force augmentation to an extremely impressive level, excelling in speed, strength, agility and durability alike. Starting with his strength, Windu was shown smashing through the armor plating of B-2 battle droids on multiple occasions and was able to steer a vulture droid mid-flight. In terms of his speed and agility, Mace can run through swarms of blaster fire, avoiding every bolt, making frequent use of force speed and dashes. He fought equally to Darth Sidious in a duel that moved too fast for Anakin Skywalker to even comprehend, a Jedi known for his exceptionally advanced reflexes. And similarly, he was able to strike the Corran warlord Carv Vastor 6 times before he could even focus his eyes. The Jedi was also adept in acrobatics, showing his ability to perform twists and twirls, often during his impressive force leaps. On to durability, Mace has crashed through a roof and landed on the floor meters below unharmed, survived a ship crash, and landed a force push while being electrocuted. In the midst of duels and singular battles, he was lifted overhead and slammed into the floor by Carv Vastor, and fought Depa Billaba after sustaining a blaster wound and an open wound to the neck, along with several minor injuries to the chest, wrists and knees, all whilst running off 2 weeks of little to no sleep. Billaba would then impale her master through the stomach, which he also survived. So essentially anything short of a decapitation or fatal blow to the heart will not put this man down. Darth Zannah was a human female from the planet Somov Rit, described as being of average height with a lean and lithe body shape akin to a gymnast. She was noted to be very conventionally attractive by human standards, unaffected by any serious dark side degradation aside from obtaining yellow eyes similar to most Sith Lords. Due to Zannah having a smaller stature and slighter build than many opponents she would face, her master Darth Bane would instruct her to not rely on her physical strength in combat. However, it must be noted that all trained Force users, especially those of Zannah's power level, are able to augment their strength through the Force when needed. Similarly, she couldn't take as hard of a punch as many other characters in the franchise due to her stature, yet it must be noted that on 2 separate occasions she has taken a boot to the ribs by Darth Bane and rolled with the impact to her feet. The first time had come at the hands of a bloodlusted Orbilis Bane, where she walked away unharmed. Yet the second time 10 years later would break her ribs, although she fought through the pain and eventually won the battle. The Sith Lord honed her speed and agility more to compensate for these disadvantages, showing a talent for it at the early age of 10 when she was able to augment her running speed to match Bane's sprint. She was skilled in acrobatic maneuvers too, often employing back handsprings or flips to evade attacks during combat, including lightsabers, physical strikes and force lightning. But perhaps her most impressive display of speed was keeping pace with Darth Bane for a prolonged fight, someone who was shown moving fast enough to deflect raindrops from a heavy storm. This is a straightforward verdict. Mace Windu outperforms Zannah in just about every category you can break physical abilities into. Windu is far stronger, more durable, and arguably demonstrates even greater levels of speed and agility. However, I don't think he could completely speed blitz Zannah. She could comfortably fight at his level of speed, but just isn't as talented with same augmentation abilities that he has put focus on. On top of that, Zannah would be incapacitated by many of the attacks that Mace has withstood and would not come close to matching his physical strength, instead having to use her tailor-made lightsaber style to counteract combatants like him. If she was hit with a good elbow or palm strike to the face, it could potentially lose her the fight. Mace Windu distinctively gains the edge. Mace Windu has frequently demonstrated his overwhelming telekinetic powers. He could flatten armies with repulsors and push a battle droid 3 kilometers on his own and 4 kilometers with the assistance of Jedi Master Sazi Tin. On top of these grand displays of power, Windu was also capable of more subtle telekinetic applications, rebuilding a stone golem as a child and often using force crusher mechanical parts. In addition to his telekinetic powers, Mace has a variety of more specialised abilities. His Vapad invention was not simply a lightsaber form, it allowed him to channel an opposing Darksider's own energies against them in a process known as the superconducting loop. This is possibly how he managed to redirect Sidious's lightning against himself, although this is not confirmed. The Jedi's other most famous ability is Shatterpoint, a rare power that allows the wielder to sense metaphysical fault lines in people, objects, or even events. It is a diverse ability with many uses, but in direct combat, Windu has never been shown capable of utilising it. Mace was also credited with Tutor Minus, but he is much more likely to only be capable of deflecting blaster bolts and energies as opposed to force lightning or lightsabers. Similarly, Windu also possessed knowledge of force healing, but once again the extent is unknown. And on top of this, he also displays knowledge of techonometry by dismantling B2 battle droids in this manner, plus the ability to slow his fall and be immovable, as shown during his duel with General Grievous on top of a Coruscant train where he called on the Force to keep himself grounded. And finally, moving on to his telepathic capabilities, Mace can use beast control and mind trick several people at a time, as well as resisting the TP of Kar Vastor, who is able to control other Force wielders. Note that Vastor was regarded by Windu himself to possess a connection to the Force on par with only Grandmaster Yoda and Anakin Skywalker, so resisting any form of the Force attack from such a being is incredibly noteworthy. Darth Zannah possessed an extremely powerful innate connection to the Force. As a 10-year-old, she was shown to be capable of snapping the necks of 2 Jedi, combusting her cousin's hand, slowing her fall off a cliff and then proceeding to levitate back up said cliff, and raising a barrier to defend herself against the Thought Bomb, which dozens of Jedi and Sith Masters alike were useless against. For good reason, Darth Bane recognised her power and believed she could surpass even himself. From there, Zannah would train for the next 2 decades to hone her latent potential, showing immense power in her telekinetic abilities, pulverising human bodies against a wall with a force push, and being able to break straight through Bane's force wall while he was distracted, and also possessing her own wall strong enough to stop any TK attacks he could muster. Zannah usually preferred more subtle forms of telekinesis though, lining up with her overall approach to combat, shown once again as a child where she pushed Bane's ankle to trip him instead of unleashing a broader wave. Also in line with her character is her use of force choke and precise organ squeezing used to torture victims. On to Zannah's most renowned field of study, her signature ability was a Sith sorcery attack known as the Spells of Madness. This psychological barrage was a mix of Mind Shard, Memory Walk, and the Horror abilities, which combined together to afflict a victim with extreme physical pain and visions of their worst nightmares. This power one-shotted everyone it was used against in the novels, driving a woman to claw her own eyes out, crippling the powerful Jedi Knight Sarazaj, and knocking the Dark Jedi Set Hearth into a coma while Zannah was only utilising a watered-down version of the spell. However, the attack wasn't always an instant win, as Darth Bane was able to break free from its hold during their final battle. Yet it must be taken into account that Bane possessed one of the strongest willpowers out of any character in the Star Wars universe, and also had prior knowledge of Zannah's sorcery, and still he was barely able to break free. In an email to author Drew Karpyshyn, I queered him on a particular line in Dynasty of Evil that implied Zannah could have one-shotted her master had she been able to charge up her spells for a prolonged period of time. His answer essentially explained that had she been at full capacity, it was possible. But since she had to spend energy and concentration on defending against Bane's lightsaber assault, her attack may not have been as potent when unleashed. Aside from sorcery, the Sith Lord was also adept in the field of telepathy, mind-tricking a room of people simultaneously. Another powerful display of her force power comes in her cloaking abilities. A decade before Dynasty of Evil, Zannah was able to mask her dark side aura to infiltrate the Jedi Temple unsuspected, and would later use the ability to sneak up on Ruxta Lassu and kill her, and then went on to cloak both herself and Bane's presence from 14 Jedi actively searching for them. Zannah's force imprint on this area was powerful enough to violently interrupt Darth Cognos' psychometry a whole decade later. Finally, when in a dark side nexus on Ambria, She was able to conjure tendrils out of dark energy to attack her master. They were unaffected by lightsabers or force lightning and could sear through flesh and bone easily. Darth Bane, who had experienced an armor suit of Orbilis beetles feasting from his flesh for 10 years before being nearly fried to death by lightning underneath said Orbilis, described the tendrils as the most painful thing he had experienced. Windu holds immense power in the Force, capable of dominating battle through his telekinesis and augmentation. However, he is facing a prodigy in the Force, and his abilities just don't quite stack up to hers. Mace can unleash a wave powerful enough to flatten 1,000 droids, but Zannah can simply stonewall it. Similarly, Shatterpoint and Vapad channeling are a non-factor in this scenario, as Shatterpoint is not a combative ability and Vapad would have little to draw from Zannah. The cards are stacked up against him when Sith sorcery is used, as he has no known counters to defend against it. Darth Zannah gains the Force edge. The Master of the Order was regarded as one of the most capable warriors of his era. Before even discussing his lightsaber skills, there is much to be said about his hand-to-hand martial abilities. Mace Windu would fight in a melee battle against the bigger, stronger and more experienced Kar Vastor while not in peak condition himself. As mentioned previously, Windu still managed to strike Vastor 6 times before he could comprehend what was happening, landing 2 hooks to his ribs, a hard knee into the same thigh he had previously hit, an elbow to the point of his chin, and 2 palm strikes to either hinge of his jaw. Similarly, Mace's martial abilities were advanced enough to allow him to fistfight hordes of B-2 battle droids, using all parts of his body as weapons. Onto his lightsaber skills, the Jedi Master was the main creator of Vapad, a variation of Juyo crafted with the goal of overwhelming an opponent with speed and strength, all the while channeling the enemy's own darkness against themselves. Windu mastered all forms of lightsaber combat, but was primarily credited with his mastery over Juyo and Vapad. It is my own analysis that he likely favoured Surisu and potentially Shien or Jem So before his creation of his ultimate fighting style. Mace would also demonstrate the lightsaber throw ability assisted by the Force, and often uses strong Force push to end lightsaber duels as he did to Quinlan Vos and the co-creator of Vapad, Sora Bulk. Ultimately, Mace Windu was extremely advanced in almost any form of combat, using his superior lightsaber form in conjunction with his devastating Force abilities and melee strikes to utterly overwhelm a single opponent or flatten a battlefield. This style of combat was proven effective during his countless battles across the Clone Wars, as he has defeated Darth Sidious himself through the superconducting loop, Quinlan Vos, Sora Bulk and General Grievous through his telekinetic abilities, later in the war fighting Grievous evenly and performing similarly against Dooku for a time. Additionally, Mace was able to easily kill Jango Fett and force Asajj Ventress to flee during their duel. Darth Zannah was a master of Surisu, wielding her saber staff in a twirling flurry of defensive maneuvers designed to nullify the strengths of the opponent's blow and harmlessly parry them away from her body until she found an opportunity to launch a counterattack or unleash her spells of madness. Due to Zannah's lighter build, she was instructed by Bane to pick up Form 3 as a way to counteract larger opponent styles, using flicks of her wrist to redirect strikes while maintaining a constant movement and evading attacks when necessary or to achieve better positioning. When on the offensive, which is rare, she would use a series of precise cuts and thrusts along with an occasional kick. It is my guess that she practiced a Taru second to Surisu due to her use of kicking along with her physique being described as similar to a gymnast's. The Dark Lord had knowledge of all lightsaber forms, however, and was able to pick out the lightsaber styles and specific sequences of her opponents. She was only disarmed once across the trilogy, coming at the hands of Darth Bane, a masterclass duelist and ridiculously strong physically, and only after she had sustained broken ribs and had already fought for a prolonged period of time. Zannah has many victories against different characters under her belt, most notably in her defeat of Darth Bane. However, she was also the MVP of the duel on Tython, killing the battle-meditated Sarozaj, Ruxta Lasu and Johan Othone, all before she reached her prime. Additionally, Zannah toyed with Set Hearth while analysing his lightsaber form, defeating him easily. Her only known defeat came at the hands of an enraged Bane, but once again this came 10 years before her prime. Darth Zannah did not end battles against skilled opponents through her use of lightsaber abilities. instead looking to bide her time to use environmental factors or unleash her sorcery. On the other hand, Mace Windu usually looked to end his battles with his blade, dominating the opponent and cutting them down. Zannah could defend from his lightsaber assault quite effectively, as Vapad's superconducting loop would be mostly nullified due to her passive fighting form, but as Kreia once said about Sarisu,
"With a lightsaber blade and enough skill in deflection, it is an excellent defense against blasters, but in other situations, it merely delays the inevitable."
Zannah would look to end the duel with her force powers rather than her blades. However, I could see a close call situation for Windu where his wide and open blade work leaves him vulnerable for a quick counter strike or thrust. But in the end, Mace Windu gains the martial edge. Mace's Shatterpoint ability granted him some form of strategic insight, but the answers it gave him were always blurry and never viable in a duel as previously discussed. For example, Windu knew that Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Chancellor Palpatine were each important Shatterpoints related to the fate of the galaxy. However, it never granted him the clarity to predict Skywalker's fall to the dark side or Palpatine's true identity as Darth Sidious. While Shatterpoint isn't the be-all end-all trump card like many of the more casual fanbase believes, it still grants Windu a strategic edge better than nothing. On top of this, Mace served as a high general in the Clone Wars, usually looking to end conflict through overwhelming force. Zannah was tactically inconsistent. She has demonstrated great insight to give her the advantage in battles, but on other occasions she has succumbed to complete tunnel vision. Zannah was incapable of defeating an unarmed Bane on Done, and would later walk herself into freshly dug graves and trip over them in their final confrontation. But in that same duel, she recognised that her master was herding her towards the shuttle to pin her to the wall, and altered her angle of retreat accordingly. During the duel on Tython, she chose to keep Johon Othone alive due to him hindering Sarozaj's lightsaber assault, and then positioned herself in a corner with enough room to protect her flanks against Zaj. And as a child, she would utilise a force push on Darth Bane's ankle to topple him instead of a larger wave, showing her tactical philosophy. Mace Windu's tactical prowess is often overrated due to the misunderstandings of the Shatterpoint ability. While he still served as a high general in the Clone Wars, he hasn't designed any genius strategies or plans as far as I'm aware. Although Zannah has succumbed to tunnel vision, this only occurred against Darth Bane, who gave her no room to assess her surroundings with his overwhelming lightsaber assault. Windu would also press her to a similar extent, but he lacked Bane's tactical sense to pin her against a wall or something similar. Zannah gains the edge in tactics and strategy. The Corran Jedi Master most often wore the standard robes of the Jedi Order in colours of tan and brown. This also included the issued boots and utility belts containing several gadgets, however none of which are applicable in combat. Mace wielded a 28cm long lightsaber hilt coated with prestigious electrum, powering its standard 1 metre length blade with an amethyst hurricane crystal. In contrast, the Dark Lady of the Sith wore the dark attire and cloaks similar to other members of her order. However, the finer details of such attire are unknown. When on missions under the disguise of wealthy merchant Alia Omek, she would have to wear more normalised clothing to fit whatever planet she is on. Zannah wielded a saber staff with a slightly longer hilt than usual, and slightly shorter carmine-coloured blades than usual at 75mm. Inside the hilt is a standard Sith synthetic crystal along with the Bane's Heart crystal, which would cause an electrical discharge when someone other than the owner tried to ignite the weapon. Her saber staff likely didn't have the ability to ignite one blade at a time, however, as it was never shown doing this during the trilogy, and has no evidence for it being able to. Neither of the two combatants wear any gear that would give an advantage in combat. Their weapons are also similarly matched, as Zannah does not ignite her blades separately, meaning that she is stuck with the double-bladed configuration. As taught by Blademaster Kasim, the saber staff wasn't inherently superior to a standard single blade. The weapon was larger and had the potential for more damage, but it was in fact more limiting than a regular lightsaber. Therefore, neither Zannah or Mace possesses a superior lightsaber design to the other. Zannah will be granted the slightest edge possible though, due to the Bane's Heart crystal admitting electrical discharge in the event someone other than its master activated the blades. This means that Zannah could pick up and use Windu's lightsaber, but he could not do the same for hers. In saying this, however, such an occasion is very unlikely and would barely be a consideration in the final verdict, which we will now move on to. The battlegrounds chosen for this conflict will be the grassy plains of Dantooine on an overcast day. This was picked to suit both combatants, giving Zannah plenty of room to retreat and Mace enough room for his wide vapad swings and acrobatics. Zannah will be taken from Dynasty of Evil and Windu from Revenge of the Sith. The Master of the Jedi Order and the Dark Lord of the Sith meet in an endless windy field, both having sensed each other's presence from miles away. The Jedi and Sith can each feel the immense power illuminating from the other and start a cautious discussion. Mace cuts to the point and urges the mysterious woman to turn her back on the dark side, giving her a last chance to survive. Zannah does not respond, only igniting her blades, so he does the same and charges at her with a burst of force speed. The Sith Lord meets the initial onslaught and redirects every vapad slash and sweep with her circular spinning defense, retreating back through the dry grass as she continues to defend herself from Windu's assault. He realizes that his opponent is a Surisu practitioner and finds that there is little for vapad to redirect. But he continues on, however, still pressuring Zannah and forcing her to give ground and place all of her attention towards surviving. She starts to get comfortable defending against his style, as although he is extremely fast and strong, he is leaving himself open due to his lightsaber form, especially when not amped by the superconducting loop. Zannah is now starting to look for openings for a parry or counterattack. After another dozen clashes, she finds the opening she is looking for when Mace sweeps horizontally at her chest twice. She ducks under the second sweep and then cartwheels to the side when he strikes downwards at her. Mid-cartwheel, the Sith extends her hand to force push Mace Windu's ankle. He rolls his ankle and staggers, giving Zannah a split second to attack, executing a series of precise thrusts and slashes, with one strike grazing Windu's chest as he evades backwards with an open stance to get his hands out of range. He soon regains his balance, composing himself and then utilising his superior strength to momentarily pin Zannah's sabre to the side and give himself an opening to boot her in the face. Unable to dodge without losing her weapon or running into Windu's blades, she takes the kick and uses the momentum to flip into a series of back handsprings, unleashing a force push as she stops in case he was chasing her. Mace has enough time to raise his defences, and he is only shoved back while maintaining his footing. He then starts calculating his next move, realising that using his vapad form will be ineffective against her, so he will try to use his size to wear her down with Gemso and Shien. Zannah starts to build up her spells to use on the Jedi, but stops as she sees him leap high in the air towards her. She uses the Force to rip the dry grass and dirt up from around her and sends the massive clump into a whirlwind around Windu while in midair to blind him. She then points her saber staff upwards, ready for him to impale himself on when he lands. Mace tries to clear the grass out of his face with his hand, but the whirlwind is too strong, so he sends out a force blast towards Zannah on the ground. The sorceress raised her defences and stone walls wave, but it still leaves a crater into the ground around her. Windu lands in front of her and wipes the dirt out of his eyes before bursting out into another lightsaber assault, attacking her with a barrage of Gemso strikes, all of which are redirected. As she is back towards the edge of the crater, Mace stretches his hand out high to force push her hard into the ledge, but Zannah has time to react and backflips out of the hole, kicking his hand on her way out and stopping his telekinetic attack. He leaps out of the crater as well to follow her, getting more aggressive as he can't penetrate her defences and starting to transition his form into Juyo. His sequences become less linear as he employs the chaotic blade work of the original 7th form, leaping and twisting around the Sith Lord, forcing her to change her angles of retreat. She is still able to defend herself, but is being forced back towards the crater, tripping her over when the loose dirt gives out underneath her boots. She stumbles back a few steps as she attempts to regain her footing. She doesn't fully trip over, but Mace takes the opportunity to smash his blade into one of hers as she holds it out to the side while trying to balance herself. Zannah's saber staff flies out of her hand and Windu goes to strike her down, but she sidesteps and ducks under the diagonal killing blow. He then follows up with a two-handed horizontal sweep and rising diagonal cleave, both of which were dodged by Zannah, who spins with the second dodge and throws her momentum into a spinning back kick to the side of Windu's knee, buckling it and dropping him slightly. Mace responds with a heavy back fist to her face, giving her a blood nose and blurring her vision. Zannah relies on her instincts to dodge his next attack, spinning out of the way, but not fast enough to avoid his sabre taking a chunk of flesh from her shoulder. She grits her teeth in pain, and her blurry vision subsides as she channels her rage, unleashing it in a massive force wave that sends Windu dozens of meters back. Now, with time to spare, Zannah wipes the water from her eyes and looks at her shoulder wound, also noticing the blood dripping from her nose and chin. She refocuses her sight and sees Windu rising to his feet in the distance about 50 meters away. He stands and force pulls her lightsaber hilt to his hand to avoid her taking it back, but she does not care. The Master of the Order charges her again, ready to end the battle once and for all, but he is stopped in his tracks when Zannah unleashes her spells of madness on his mind. Mace trips over as he feels a terrible pain in his head, similar to a hot knife bisecting his brain's 2 hemispheres before exploding into 100 smaller shards. He screams out again, clutching at his head before noticing the terrain has changed. He finds himself on top of a massive mound of dead clone troopers and Jedi, reaching impossibly high into the Coruscant sky. In front of him is a shadowy figure that morphs into Count Dooku. His eyes glow yellow as his crimson saber ignites. In an attempt to make his failure on Geonosis right, he ignites his own blade and strikes Dooku down, but nothing happens. The Count's form now seems to be in a mirror that slowly morphs Dooku into a reflection of Windu. His reflection is different though, and he notices his yellow Sith eyes glowing back at him, and he looks down to see his amethyst lightsaber has turned red. Windu pounds on the mirror in anger as he shouts no, breaking the glass and revealing the land beneath him. He watches as buildings and Republic flags burn over top of the streets littered with thousands of dead civilians laying next to parading battle droids. Windu starts to realise this is an illusion and tries to fight against the spell, but it is too late. The sorceress attack ends with a carmine blade piercing Windu's chest, revealing the real world to him again, and also the sight of Zannah looking up at him with an evil smirk on her face as her lightsaber skewers him. The Jedi swings a punch at her, but she ducks under it easily and puts her hand on his chest to push him off her blade. He stumbles to the ground and fades away into the living force. Therefore, I declare Darth Zannah the most likely victor. Overall, Zannah would win a majority of the time, but nearly all victories would be earned through a very tough fight, and certainly not with a 10 out of 10 majority. It comes down to Vapad's superconducting loop not having an effect on Zannah, and the form itself leaving him too open for a patient combatant like her. Any other forms he has demonstrated true expertise in would also be ineffective against her, as her style revolves around defending against that sort of assault. Furthermore, it is unlikely that Windu has any counter to her spells of madness, which would ultimately lead to his defeat majority of the time. Windu would still likely batter Zannah around and leave her injured by the end of the fight, potentially posing an even greater threat to her than Darth Bane did due to his greater willingness and skill in applying martial strikes within his lightsaber sequences. But I give Zannah a 65% chance of victory. Let me know in the comments if you have any points to make or anything I missed. And also let me know if you agree or disagree with the verdict and why. To all those who have stuck through the end of my second instalment of the Versus series, thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.